York, and Vienna, and in Washington, D.C., London, Paris, and Brussels. Ambassador Naqvi was appointed member Chairman's Advisory Council in Pakistan Atomic Energy Commission after his retirement from Foreign Service, where he functioned as advisor to Chairman PAC on international affairs. Ambassador Naqvi is founding executive director of CISS, which was established in 2010. You have the mic, sir.
Thank you, Afira. Uh, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to this webinar organized by the Center for International Strategic Studies. And the title is, of course, Chemical Weapons Convention, Challenges, Approaches, and Implementation. So an overall picture. Today's webinar aims to explore the entire range of issues pertaining to the CWC. I will leave it to the speakers to do that in their respective presentations. But I would like to start things off with a discussion of the convention itself and its significance. The CWC, which was opened for signature in 1993 and came into force in 1997, banned parties to the convention from the development, production, or acquisition of chemical weapons and their proliferation to other states. It also made it incumbent upon states to destroy existing stocks of chemical weapons possessed by them and related facilities also for the production of such weapons. Under Article 8 of the Convention, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, OPCW, was formed as an exclusive body responsible for overseeing and ensuring implementation of the agreement by member states. Pakistan, as a signatory, is bound to implement the provisions of the CWC under Article 7 of the Convention, which is national implementation measures that binds the states to cooperate with other states and the OPCW. As a signatory state of the CWC, Pakistan has played a key role in the functioning of the OPCW. Pakistani diplomat and my colleague, Ambassador Shaukat Umar, was Deputy Executive Secretary of the Preparatory Commission of OPCW 1996-97. In the global context, of course, several states are still not a party to the CWC. Hence, there may be stockpiles of chemicals in these states which are prohibited by the convention and are still in use by some states. This is a sobering thought worth pondering and a challenge to the international community. Ladies and gentlemen, the origin of the CWC goes back to the horrors of the First World War, 1914 to 1918. Although some international agreements pertaining to the use of chemical weapons had existed earlier, most notably the agreements emanating from the Hague Conference of 1899, which gave to the International Committee a number of conventions. The horrendous effects of the use of chemical weapons outraged the sensibilities of the combatant nations of the war, which led to the drawing up of the 1925 Geneva Protocol. It made it illegal for use of chemical and biological weapons in war by any state. The protocol was drawn up and signed by the League of Nations, and it entered into force on 8th February 1928. But while the Geneva Convention prohibited the use of these weapons of mass destruction, it did not address the issue of possession of biological and chemical weapons. This was addressed in subsequent decades, and the CWC was the second such convention that banned an entire class of weapons. The first one being the Biological Weapons Convention of 1972. During the Cold War, both superpowers built and maintained stockpiles of chemical weapons, but neither of the two openly resorted to their use, owing to the taboo against the use. International law is meant to hold civilized nations together in an otherwise anarchical world in various areas of human activity. The CWC is an important international agreement, and its breakdown may have dire repercussions for the security of the international community at large. In order to develop a robust implementation mechanism, the internal compliance program of UNSCR 1540, UN Security Council Resolution 1540, is essential. The resolution 1540 mandates the imposition of appropriate export controls aimed at strengthening border and port detection capabilities and preventing the trafficking in materials and technology related to development, production, and use of nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons. Furthermore, the member states are required to adopt and legislate regulatory and enforcement measures to achieve the objectives of the resolution. In the substantive sessions that will follow, eminent scholars and practitioners dealing with CWCA issues will explore the various technical, legal, and political aspects of the convention and the consequences of their violation in regions vulnerable to the use of these egregious weapons of mass destruction. Moreover, they will also make valuable suggestions and recommendations for further improving the system, which could be provided as an input to the ongoing 25th CWC Conference of State Parties in The Hague, which is now taking place. I will end here, and I invite all the participants, both the speakers and the audience, to share and benefit from the enriching and illuminating session of the webinar that will take place today. I thank you.
Thank you, sir. In today's panel, we have 5 speakers. Before I introduce our first speaker, I would like to mention that each speaker will have 15 minutes to speak on his subject, and all attendees are welcome to write their question.
Little louder, please. Little louder.
So, am I audible now?
Yes. Now you are.
All attendees are welcome to write their questions in Q&A or chat box during the discussion. So our first speaker is Mr. Ali Sattar. Mr. Ali Sattar will speak on Pakistan's position with regards to CWC and politicization of CWC. Mr. Ali Sattar is career diplomat, presently serving as Director, Arms Control and Disarmament at Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Previously, he served at Embassy of Brussels from 2016 to 2020. He is graduate of LUMS and subsequently did his MBA from Shoreditch School of Business, York University, Canada. Before joining civil service, he worked for Unilever. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Akira, for that introduction. I'll take help from a PowerPoint presentation. I'll just share it with you.
जी सर सर अभी सर
Is the presentation visible?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just start. I'm Ali Sattar. I'm Director Disarmament at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I'll be talking about the politicization of Chemical Weapons Convention. Following will be the scheme of my presentation. I'll give a brief background of Chemical Weapons Convention, role of OPCW, and I will highlight three specific cases to give you some indication of how OPCW is being politicized. Ambassador Ali Sarwan Akri has already given an introduction of about the CWC and its historical background. But just to aid my presentation, I'll just briefly share with you why CWC was Chemical Weapons Convention was first formed in the Chemical Weapons Convention aims to eliminate an entire category of weapons of mass destruction by prohibiting development, production, acquisition, stockpiling, retention, and transfer of chemical weapons by state parties. So one of the unique features of Chemical Weapons Convention is that it's incorporation of the challenge inspection, whereby any state party in doubt about another state party's compliance can request a surprise inspection. CWC is a near universal treaty, unique among the disarmament treaties in the sense that it is non-discriminatory. There are no possessor states and there is no exception to non-acquisition. All member states have agreed to chemically disarm by destroying any stockpiles of chemical weapons they may hold and any facility which produce them, as well as any chemical weapons they abandoned on territory of other state parties. So in comparison to, just to give an example, as compared to Treaty on Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, there has been no disruption in application, and the convention is a success of rule-based, consensus-based rulemaking. As the implementing body of the Chemical Weapons Convention, OPCW was given the technical and scientific mandate with the role of determining with the role to make determination of alleged use. OPC, it is very important to note that OPC does not have the mandate to assign blame or investigate. It can only verify, and it verifies through a very thorough verification and inspection regime. As you can see in the slide, they have a very stringent verification, and they routinely conduct inspections to make sure that there is no diversion of chemicals, Schedule 1 chemicals for weapons. So this is the brief background of the OPCW. Its secretariat is based in The Hague. It has almost 193 members, and it has 41 executive members that for 2 years term. It has a technical secretariat as well. So so coming to the main point of my presentation, I'll basically be touching on three different cases. The first one is the alleged use of chemical weapons by Navalny, and last I would briefly give you some details about the proposed addition of central nervous system acting agents to Schedule 1. So on the alleged use of chemical weapons on Syria, I'll give you some brief background of what has been done so far. So so in 2013, OPCW and UN joint mission was formally established to oversee the timely implementation of chemical weapons program of Syrian Arab Republic in the safest and most secure manner possible. Subsequently, OPCW fact-finding mission was set up in 2014 to establish facts surrounding allegations of the use of toxic chemicals, reportedly chlorine, for hostile purposes in Syrian Arab Republic. Subsequently, the OPC-UN joint investigation mechanism was established by UN Security Council to identify the perpetrators of chemical weapon attacks confirmed by the fact-finding mission. The joint investigative mechanism presented its report to the Security Council and informed the OPCW about its findings. JM mandate expired in November 2017. On the expiry of Joint Investigation Mechanism, IIT, that is the investigative and identification mechanism team was established, and reports and basically what it does is its mandate is to apportion responsibility and reconfirm the evidences that have been collected by the fact-finding mission and the joint investigation mechanism. So presently, the status of this case is that as we talk, French draft resolution has been presented at the 25th session of the CSP. It is going to be voted, and in case if the majority vote for it, there might be sanctions on Syria. So why we think with this case, why do we think that OPCW is being, or Chemical Weapons Convention is being politicized? Some member states have argued that formation of the attributive team, that is the investigative and identification team, is an anomaly and departure from norm, and goes against the spirit of OPCW remaining as a verification body. Furthermore, in the past, attribution has been the mandate of United Nations Security Council. Furthermore, any amendment to the OPCW working mandate and the formation of bodies such as the Joint Investigation Mechanism and IIT should have gone through the amendment conference. The formation does not have consensus of the members of all member states, indicating politicization and polarization. So far, everything that has been done at the OPCW, it was through a consensus, whereas the establishment of IIT was done by a majority vote, which was departure from the past. Some technical concerns have been raised as well, considering that the initial teams did not visit Syria for evidence collection. Evidence that was collected is mired with inaccuracies. It has been secondary evidence based on the NGOs that were present on ground. So therefore, assigning blame to member state and incurring sanctions is a huge responsibility. So relevant due diligence should have been made to avoid the current politicization. The second case I would like to highlight here is the Navalny case. Basically, Navalny was a Russian opposition figure and anti-corruption activist. He was poisoned with a Novichok nerve agent on August 20th, 2020, and was hospitalized under serious conditions. During a flight from Tomsk to Moscow, he became very ill and was taken to a hospital after an emergency landing in Germany. The use of nerve agent was confirmed by 5 organizations for the provision of chemical weapons certified laboratories. OPCW said that an inhibitor that was from the group of Novichok was found in the Navalny's blood, urine, and skin samples. At the same time, the OPC report clarified that Navalny was poisoned with a new type of Novichok, which was not included in the list of controlled chemicals of the Chemical Weapons Convention. In September 2020, the Federal Republic of Germany requested technical assistance from the OPCW Technical Secretariat under subparagraph 38E of Article 8 of Chemical Weapons Convention in relation to the alleged use of poisoning of Mr. Navalny. In response, a team of experts from OPCW deployed to Germany and independently collected biomedical samples from Mr. Navalny's body after receiving his family's consent. Upon Germany's request, the samples collected by the OPC experts are subsequently sent for analysis to OPC designated laboratories. So, in this entire case, Russia has alleged that they have that the findings and the samples have not been shared with them as initially desired and announced by the Secretary General of OPCW. So, at the request of Russian Federation, OPC subsequently published a correspondence between the OPC Technical Secretariat and Russian Federation from 1st of October to March in this matter. So in the entire case, Russia has basically made two assertions. Firstly, the technical assessment has been politicized and the data was not available in a transparent manner by Germany. There are discrepancies from a scientific point of view as to why the alleged use of Novichok agent did not affect the people close to Mr. Navalny when he was on the flight. So the last case that I would like to share with you is the CNS acting agent, which is another example of how Chemicals Weapon Convention or OPCW is being politicized. In the session of Executive Council, in the last session of the Executive Council, basically, US intended to draft a decision on adding CNS acting agent for purposes of law enforcement to Schedule 1. Conventionally, additions to schedule are done through the CSP and proper procedures are followed. However, in 2019, 3 chemicals were added to the schedule without following the due procedure. But there was consensus among member states. In the case of CNS acting agents, since there are a few member states who do not want to include this in the Schedule 1 as they see it of utility for right controls. There was resistance from some countries, and we could clearly see that 2 different standards were used when last year in 2019 when 3 scheduled chemicals were added to Schedule 1 and versus chemical CNS acting agent. So to conclude, I would just say that CWC is a treaty that has so far been projected as an ideal case for future disarmament treaties. It is almost universal. All these cases that I have just spoken about, they show and they prove that politicization has undermined the credibility of OPCW. And if this is compromised, all future armed controls initiative would be undermined because this has been portrayed as one of the best disarmament treaties that has been that does not discriminate between any member state. So with this, I thank you and I come to the end of my presentation. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Sattar, for a very comprehensive presentation. Our second speaker is Dr. Javed Khurshid. He will give his views on Pakistan's adherence and contributions to CWC, challenges and implementation. Dr. Javed Khurshid is Senior Research Fellow at CISS. He worked with Pakistan Atomic Energy Commission for 40 years in different capacities, including consultant, advisor, director, and director general. His expertise is in mitigation and control of CBRN. He represented Pakistan in many BTWC state parties and technical meetings at UN Geneva. He is technical committee member of ATC MOFA internal compliance on export control laws in accordance with UNSCR 1540. He is member of advisory boards of many national and international journals and author of 70 publications. Mike is yours, sir. So please unmute yourself.
Thank you so much, Afira, for the nice introduction. Today, I will be talking about on the adherence of Pakistan adherence to the compliance challenges of CWC. Basically, I will mention some of the challenges in the beginning and then deal what Pakistan is doing about that. So the challenges are destroying all the chemical weapons by 2023, not allowing member states to acquire chemicals to keep a balance between advancement, development, and security concern, and the politicization of OPCW, and in the last, the universality. The universality of the CWC can only be achieved when state parties state parties reach to the objectives of their national legislation and allow verification for this purpose. The state parties must adopt three basic steps in their respective countries. First, they must adopt legislation to make CWC effective against toxic chemicals, regulating scheduled chemicals related and chemicals production facilities. Second, they must be clear about the purpose of the utilization for which a particular chemical is produced. And third, they must be clear about the laws, and all the facilities should be open for OPCW inspection. Pakistan adherence to these all things which I have mentioned and challenges which we have is very good. Pakistan is fully committed to the objectives of the convention and its effective implementation of all the articles of the convention. Pakistan is a member of Executive Council of OPCW since 1998, worked as a coordinator of the Asian group since 2004. Pakistan is making all the efforts to achieve OPCW objectives, and its efforts are now well recognized internationally and have been identified as one of the 6 countries in the Asia for the establishment of regional production center. And it has been picked up as a coordinator for the security security education in Yemen. Pakistan adherence is as a non-possessory state will have to make all the efforts to support the cause of the global toxic chemical disarmament as the basic principle of its security policy, and should continue to strongly support all OPCW's international and regional initiative to strengthen disarmament and non-proliferation efforts. Pakistan is conscious of the fact that the proliferation of WMDs and their main delivery pose a threat to the international peace and security. It also supports all the legal controls on import, export, transits, and transit shipments of equipment, materials, and technologies relevant to CWC. What Pakistan has done to implement these things administratively to implement CWC, Pakistan has already taken many steps, such as formation of the national authority. The Foreign Secretary of the country is the chair and national focal person for internal coordination and to liaison with OPCW, CWC member states, and other relevant stakeholders. On the side of, for the legislative measures are also taken, such as approval of environmental production law, hazardous material law, anti-terrorism act, chemical weapon ordinance, export control act, CWC, implementation rules, export policy order, import policy order 2001, and internal compliance of UN 1540. Taking this step, Pakistan has been recognized as a chemical member state, and it is identified for providing training in protection for the chemical weapons. Pakistan is meeting its obligation with the steps mentioned above. These steps cover a range of activities related to many areas essential for the country's economy, such as industrial, agriculture, and chemical production. Pakistan Parliament has legislated the laws mentioned above, which prohibits the development, production, acquisition of stockpiling, retention, use, and transfer of the chemical weapons. The production, use, acquisition, possession, transfer, import, or export of any scheduled chemicals, except for permissible purposes. The use of riot control agents as a method of warfare, the construction of any premises or equipment intended to be used for the production of chemical weapon, facilities, verification, activity. Also, it prescribes punishment for violation of ordinance and authorized MUFA, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as national authority to formulate rules for implementing the laws. Pakistan also established the Wide Area Network in March 2008. It is a sophisticated online system to receive data from registered manufacturer, importer, exchange, and collate national-wide information about the import, export, transport, and production, consumption, processing, and storage of chemicals and other CWC relevant information. Collated data is accessible to all authorized stakeholders and forwarded to OPCW on annual basis. Pakistan also actively participated in deliberations of the task force on Stockholm Convention. It regularly submits a declaration of national activities annually and facilitate OPCW routine industrial inspections to ensure safety and security. Till now, 15 successful routine industrial inspections of declared facilities have been carried out by OPCW in Pakistan. These routine inspections have also proved the country's commitment to maintaining the standard of safety and security and conducting a national protection program under CWC for effective controls of the chemical industry. Besides that, national authority has participated in the emergency developing need assistance regional workshops in 2011, and international basic assistance and production courses is also carried out in October 2011-12. Besides that, Pakistan follows, for all the purposes, Pakistan follows the guidelines and procedures of the Australia Group. The Australia Group controls the export of the dual-use chemicals and a list of chemicals and their precursors over which a strict control is needed. Pakistan is strictly follows this list and protocols given by the Australia Group. Beside all these efforts which we are doing for implementation of CWC, we have to take further steps to fulfill our commitments as the best and exemplary state to follow CWC. I like to emphasize here the continuous outreach efforts are also needed to educate the industry and traders. The inspection manual should be regularly upgraded and mock inspections should also be conducted regularly. Emergency response exercise in case of chemical incidents. Organization of national assistance and production exercises and bilateral safety and security training for the chemical industry and university chemists. Pakistan has to implement the chemical know-how, ensuring the safety of our people and protecting the environment. This can only be done by forming a National Institute of Responsible Chemistry in the country. The proposed institute can increase national capabilities by holding academic courses to meet domestic controls and future challenges and the requirement of capable manpower with the advanced technological applications. As a state party, the country should consider ways and means to incorporate the implementation of CWC in academic and research institute. The implementation procedures are very important when using chemicals for sustainable development. Here I will mention the internal compliance program of UN 1540 is an essential component on which work has already been done by me and another speaker in this seminar, Dr. Zafar Ali. We have suggested an internal compliance committee in each university and research institute should be formed to scrutinize projects, research and research materials before they are put to use for practical purposes. Here we have to be careful as we should not be hindering the progress of science and technology in the country. Besides exploring innovative dual-use technologies, we have to keep a balance between science freedom and security concerns. One method to reduce this risk is that we should establish guidelines, the code of conduct and code of ethics for scientists specific to deal with the project research and research materials. A critical review of policy implementation shows that a lot has to be done, but still a lot has been done, but still a lot has to be done in policy formulation and implementation. Following are the recommendations for unhindered future implementation of the Chemical Weapon Convention. The recommendations which I like to give here is that a national scientific organization dealing with all OPCW, CWC matters may be formed. A working group should be formed for the national implementation assistant cooperation with CWC. Technology and human resources adapting dual use technologies should be developed. Industry inspection should be made mandatory after every 6 months. Industry should be asked to have mock trips, develop local facilities for monitoring and decontamination, and identify the nearest hospital. Cargo monitoring is also required. We should prepare certified specialists to monitor the trade and industrial activities. An updated list of dual-use chemicals as per Australia Group and Wasner arrangement criteria should be maintained and revised by SecDev, MUFA from time to time following Resolution 1540. The facilities in the hospital at the national level should be developed for reduction, protection, and decontamination in case of chemical emergency. And appropriate chemistry courses should be introduced at the university level. Courses for 3 to 5 days may be arranged for the chemist in the industry and the university chemistry teachers. Scientists should be made familiar with the state-of-art investigation procedures. Innovative technologies as 3D laser printing and different electronic gadgets are the things which we should make the scientists familiar to. Code of conduct and code of ethics relating to dual-use research, publication, and projects should be developed and followed at all research institutes and universities. Pakistan should become a member of Australia Group and Wasner arrangement. Their technical support and help will be useful for our human resource development. Thank you so much. I give it to Afira.
Thank you, Dr. Javed. Now, I would like to invite our third speaker, Dr. Mohammad Absal, to speak on routine industrial inspection challenges for the OPCW. Dr. Absal was commissioned in Pakistan Army in 1979. He is graduate of Command and Staff College, Quetta, and has a master's in Management Sciences. He worked as staff officer in Arms Control and Disarmament Affairs, SPD. In 2006, he was tasked to establish Camp Biodefense Directorate at Testo, where he was appointed its first director. He also played an important role in establishment of a regional CWC Assistance and Protection Center in Pakistan. He also has served as advisor to DG Desto on Camp Bio affairs. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Afira. Thank you for your nice words. As far as my part of the presentation is concerned, I would be mainly talking about the routine industrial inspections and the challenges which are there for the OPCW. Now, as we have heard the other speakers as well, and you would continue hearing the speakers after me, that the Chemical Weapons Convention is one such disarmament treaty which distinguishes itself from the other disarmament treaties, that it has got, besides general provisions of the convention, it has also got a verification regime as part of the convention. So as a result, the convention not only calls for elimination, non-acquisition of chemical weapons, but it also calls for a monitored and ensured destruction of the existing stocks of the chemical weapons. Now, as I have said earlier, the convention contains both the general provisions and also a verification regime. The verification regime of the convention can be very broadly categorized that it has two major parts. One part of the regime basically deals with the routine inspections, and the other part, which has very elaborately covered in the convention, that deals with the challenge inspection procedures. Now, saying a few words about the, routine inspections. Now, when we talk of routine inspections, now these routine inspections are again of almost two categories. One is routine industrial inspections, the industries which have been declared by a particular state party. So those kind of routine inspections. And the other part of the routine inspections of the convention deals with the declared stocks of the chemical weapons, their storage facilities, their production facilities, and their destruction facilities. So these are two major parts of the routine inspection. And as far as the non-routine missions are non-routine inspection, so the challenge inspection, though it has not been carried out so far anywhere in the world, besides certain practice exercises, but this inspection is also very much part of the convention. Now, as far as routine inspections are concerned, those are generally carried out of the declared activities declared by the national authorities, by the state parties through their national authorities based on their national legislations. Whereas the non-routine activities, the challenge inspection, etc., could be carried out for a declared activity if that declared activity has not been done accurately. There is some discrepancy in that, or the declaration is wrong. Or it could also be held for an activity which has not been declared. So the third aspect about the non-routine missions is that beside challenge inspection, the other technical assistance which could be sought by a state party could be provided by the OPCW under these non-routine missions. And besides that, the capacity building of a state party through various assistance and protection courses can also be held under these non-routine missions. Now, having talked about the verification mechanism, now the verification process which has been covered in the convention is very simple. It is based on generally it is based on the declarations by a state party. And when that declaration is received at the OPCW, the technical secretariat carries out required evaluation of that declaration, and then based on that evaluation and as per the procedure given in the convention, on-site inspections are carried out, and then after the on-site inspections, a proper report is prepared which is submitted to the technical secretariat containing all required analysis. Now, based on that report, then either there could be some required remedial measures could be initiated at the OPCW, or if need be, a re-inspection of the site if it has not complied with the general provisions of the convention. So re-inspection could also be carried out. Now, there are certain, whether it is a routine inspection, whether it is a non-routine mission, in all the cases, there are certain essential elements of each inspection. And these essential elements are generally almost same. And there's not much which we say is different, because in each case there is an initiation of the inspection at the OPCW, then preparation, then notification to the concerned state parties, arrival of the inspection team at the point of entry, then conduct of inspection. And during the inspection, there could be review of certain documents, there could be sample taking at the site, there could be interview of certain staff members at the site. So then all this is done with the help and in coordination with the rep of the national authority of that particular state party. And then based on that, the report is compiled. So this was all in very brief terms that I have tried to give a rundown of the verification mechanism which has been contained in the Chemical Weapons Convention. And now we in the next part we would see that what could be the possible challenges which this verification mechanism, which this verification process, which this verification regime has put on the OPCW. So now we'll see these various challenges. And in my opinion, the first and the foremost challenge for the OPCW is the universality of the Chemical Weapons Convention. Though the membership of this convention compared with any other convention is more, there are about 193 state parties to this convention, but still there are few states, there are certain states which are only signatories and not a state party to this convention, and still there are states which are not the state party to the convention, as it has also been pointed out by the ambassador right at the outset. Now, these non-state parties are a challenge for the OPCW, a challenge for the complete implementation of the convention. In the presence of these, say, non-state parties are mere signatories, the complete and total implementation of the convention, in my opinion, is not possible. The next problem which I feel is the challenge which is faced by the OPCW is the globalization of the the globalization trend which is there. Now you see the chemical R&D, it can take place at anywhere, at any time, and the results can also be communicated with a speed through the availability of IT resources and the availability of global internet. The information can be, say, transferred with a lot of speed and with a lot of accuracy and in a lot of details. That is one aspect of the globalization. The other aspect is that there could be many kind of information pertaining to, say, production, synthesis, or industrial processes, which is now available on the open source to various state parties, state actors and non-state actors. So that is also that means in both ways, in good or bad, say this globalization is also a challenge for the OPCW. Then next is the convergence of the ChemBio. So there is an increasing convergence between the chemistry and biology, which poses challenges to the implementation of the conventions, because the key ChemBio agents are what we generally call the dual purpose, dual use ChemBio agents. And the dual use agents are actually the main challenge for the OPCW, because for their say possible use for peaceful purposes, so their trade, their transfer, their shipments are to be and their production is to be allowed. And the other side of these dual use agents is that they can also be used as a precursors or as a major component for the production of chemical weapons. So then it has to be controlled also. So because of this convergence, most of the state parties find it very difficult to adjust their legislation, adjust their national legislation, and at times it also leads to certain inconsistencies in declaration of plant size, where we say that generally the discrete organic chemicals are being produced through biomediated processes. Then the other aspect with regard to declaration issues could be that different interpretation by the state parties of certain declaration obligations which are there. So there are say problems with the interpretation. OPCW and most of the members of the OPCW and some of the staff of the OPCW, they interpret it differently, whereas certain state parties, they interpret the same provisions of the convention slightly differently. So as a result, the declarations made by the state parties are either not there or they are not properly, they are not consistent with the provisions of the convention. And one more aspect which leads to inconsistent declaration is the purity level of various discrete organic chemicals. That purity level has not been very precisely defined in the Chemical Weapons Convention. So as a result of this purity level, this interpretation of various provisions, so there are inconsistencies in the declaration made by various state parties, the capacity limitations. I feel this is the major challenge which is going to come to the OPCW, and it's going to haunt the OPCW in the times to come, because now when most of the declared stocks of the chemical weapons, their storage facilities, their production facilities have already been destroyed, and it's just about around 2% of the chemical weapons and one odd storage facility, and so these are still there. Now, when this has already been done, so the budgetary constraints have started affecting the OPCW, and because of these budgetary constraints, the OPCW has started reducing its overall staff, has started restricting its training and capacity building activities. So the other aspect which is also affecting the capacity of the OPCW is the number of the industrial units, number of the variety of industrial units world over is increasing. So on one hand, the task is increasing. On the other hand, the budget is decreasing. So it would, I feel in the times to come, the capacity would be the major challenge for the OPCW. So though there could be certain say steps taken by the OPCW where by these budgetary constraints and this capacity of the staff can be overcome while using the latest information technology and internet facilities. So there could be various things to which OPCW can resort to overcome these budgetary constraints and staff shortages. And again, under the prevailing environments of, say, I would say the latest technology available to the state parties, to the chemical industries, the OPCW should also adjust itself to the latest availability of the latest technology and go for selection of sites in a way that the most critical but lesser in number sites are selected for the inspection, so that the budgetary constraints and the other staff constraints can also be overcome. Adoption of new technologies, as we generally say, the change is the most is one such activity which is mostly resisted. So this happens in the OPCW also, and I feel to other challenge for the OPCW is adoption of the new technologies. We should get out of on-site inspections and lay more emphasis on instrumental verifications and instrumental monitorings. That way, the OPCW would be able to say overcome its challenges and face the situation more squarely and in a more efficient manner if the latest use of technology is adopted. So these were the various challenges which I thought could be faced by the OPCW while implementing the verification regime which has been made part of the Chemical Weapons Convention, and which has very successfully, very successfully, I would say so far, it has ensured almost complete elimination of the existing stocks of chemical weapons, their production facilities, their storage facilities, their delivery means, though some of the industries has also been converted for peaceful purposes. So when all this has been done, so because of this verification regime, and we have also talked about the certain challenges which are there for the OPCW. Now, at the end of, towards the end of my presentation, my part of the presentation, I would talk about just 3-4 recommendations which, if adopted, which if taken into consideration, maybe can help in reducing the challenges faced by the OPCW. And first is role of national implementation. Here, I would say the implementation of chemical weapons convention, all the conventions, but in particular the chemical weapons convention, it all depends on the capacity of the national authorities of state parties. So that means if the national implementation is if the national legislation is made in such a way that it can take care of the latest developments in technology, in information transfer, and in the internet facilities, so then the national authority should be appropriately made strong, and it should be made strong enough to implement that national legislation. And if that national legislation is properly implemented in a state party, then it would be the challenges for the OPCW and challenges for the international community and challenges for the community would reduce. And I would like to say that in this regard, Dr. Javed Khurshid, he made quite a few recommendations. And if those recommendations are also read in conjunction with the few I am making here, it would become, I would say, a very, very wholesome exercise. So the next recommendation I have already covered. The national authorities need to be made stronger, and the national legislation should be made to meet the latest challenges and the latest requirements, and the national authority should be such that they should be able to implement those legislations. And then is the effective finally is the cooperation with relevant stakeholders, both at the national level and regional level. With this, ladies and gentlemen, I would say I come to the end of my presentation, and now I would say request Afira, Ms. Afira, please take over. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our fourth speaker of today's panel is Mr. Zawar Abdi, who will speak on CWC implementation in light of UNSCR 1540. Mr. Zawar Abdi is a senior research fellow at CISS. He has served in Pakistan Army for over 26 years on various assignments. He has also served in Arms Control and Disarmament Affairs branch at SPD. He has been a visiting fellow at Stimson Center, Washington, D.C., and a visiting fellow at James Martin Center for Non-Proliferation Studies, Monterey, California. He has been part of interagency groups responsible for drafting Pakistan's Export Control Act 2004 and designing an establishment of Strategic Export Control Division of Pakistan. He has been an expert consultant supporting United Nations Security Council 1540 Committee for a period of 5 years to monitor the implementation of Resolution 1540 by the UN member states. You have the mic, sir.
Thank you, Fira. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. You have heard, Ali Sattar and Dr. Javed Khurshid and Dr. Absal have already spoken about the convention itself. I just, to start with, I'll say that especially because I've been associated with 1540 resolution, group of experts, resolution has completed its about 17 years of age since its adoption in 2004. The resolution was adopted under Chapter 7 of United Nations Charter, and it's a legal binding resolution as there is Article 25 of the UN Charter makes it obligatory for all member states to abide by the resolutions adopted by the UN Security Council. The resolution covers whole spectrum of WMD, their means of delivery and the related material and technologies. Over the last 17 years, there have been 2 comprehensive reviews of 1540 resolution, one in 2009 and the other in 2016. And the third was to be completed by the, by April 2021, as the mandate of the UN Security Council Resolution 1540 was to be, finishing on 27th of April this year. But somehow this resolution, to my mind, is still hanging in air, as the comprehensive review, which was required under Resolution 1977 of 2011, has not been completed and has been postponed till the end of 2021. Now, if the resolution review is not completed as per the earlier resolution, and the comprehensive review has been postponed for another about 8 to 9 months, the mandate of the committee, unless in the next couple of days there is a new resolution is brought for the postponement and limited extension of the mandate of the committee, probably there will be a confusion as far as the implementation and enforcement of Resolution 1540. Sorry. This was, only to give you a little background on 1540. As Icp mentioned in the beginning, that this convention, Chemical Weapon Convention, it prohibits certain activities by the states, which include developing, producing, acquiring, stockpiling, or retaining, using, and transferring, or directly or indirectly, of the chemical weapons. And also the prohibition on the assistance being provided or encouragement on the inducement to the others for development of the Chemical Weapon Convention. Almost the same kind of things are there in the 1540 resolution as well. Though the conventions are mostly oriented toward the state party obligation, but in CWC, as per the Article 7 of the convention, even the national person, the legal person, or the national of the state party are also, to be prohibited doing all those kind of an activities which are prohibited for the state. So, in other words, the non-governmental people, a common man of a state, is also not allowed to carry out those activities which the state is not allowed to carry out as far as the chemical weapons are concerned. So is the case with the 1540 resolution. The only difference is that the 1540 resolution is specifically only for the non-state actors and not for the states. The operating paragraph 1 of the resolution 1540, which is a political undertaking or political commitment by the state that they will not provide any kind of support to a non-state actor that attempts to develop, acquire, manufacture, possess, transport, or transfer or use of the WMD, which include obviously the chemical weapons and their means of delivery. Whereas the operating paragraph 2, the states are the member states, the United Nations member states, gave a commitment that they will develop a legal framework, legislative framework within the national procedure to prohibit these kind of an activity, which I mentioned earlier in the operating paragraph 1, as well as they are also mentioned in the Chemical Weapon Convention. Especially for the non-state actors and for the terrorist purposes. And also, when an attempt to engage in any of the foregoing activity participate in them as an accomplice or financing them. So you will see that there is a lot of similarity between the prohibitions in the CWC and the resolution, 1540 resolution. But if there's an addition to the 1540 resolution, which is operating paragraph 3. Operating paragraph 3, the states are committed, have given a commitment to the United Nations Security Council or the international community that they will enforce effective measures to establish domestic control, to prevent the proliferation of the WMDs, their means of delivery, including by establishing appropriate controls over related materials and to this and its shell. Then they explain under this 4 subparagraph other activities. And those are that this is about the production facility, the storage facility, the border control, the export control, transit and transshipment, etc., etc. But then if there is so much of a similarity, then why mention the chemical weapons in resolution 1540? The reason is that there are certain areas which are, not, if not left addressed, they are inadequately covered in the Chemical Weapon Convention, whereas they are being covered more in detail in 1540 resolution for the purpose of implementation. Number 1 is the procedures and requirements for transportation of chemical weapons. The transport part of the chemical weapons is not covered under the Chemical Weapon Convention. Procedures and requirements for security and production facilities, storage site, and during the transportation. There is the security part of it, while it is being stored in the storage or under the production or under the transport, which is not being adequately. It might have been covered in one of the annexes, which are part of the convention itself. There are a number of them, but not as far as the physical security is concerned. Then the third thing is, while in the convention, schedule 1, 2, and 3, the chemical agents have, or the chemicals have been identified, which are prohibited or partially prohibited, or which are the precursor under the schedule 3, which are not, which are only regulated. But the dual use technology or the equipment or the materials have not been listed in convention, whereas this has been covered under the resolution 1540. Now, when the resolution was adopted in 2004, there were 161 state parties to the Chemical Weapons Convention. And over the years, from 2004 to 2001, 32 states have been, or the countries have been included in the list of the members of the state parties to this Chemical Weapon Convention, and now it comes to 193, as earlier mentioned by Dr. Absal also. But the point is that this 193 includes the 2 non-UN member states, that is the Holy City and the state of Palestine. Whereas the 4 UN states, UN member states, are not still state party to the convention, as earlier highlighted by Dr. Absal, which include Egypt, DPRK, Israel. Israel, by the way, signatory only, are not they have not carried out the ratification of the convention, therefore they are not the complete state party. And also the newly born state of South Sudan is still not, so there are 4 UN member states, out of 193 of the UN member states, there are 4 who are not still the state party with the convention. That makes it difficult for the convention, although theoretically or as far as the numbers are concerned, a near globalization or universalization has been achieved by the Opcw. But it is strange to know that as far as the implementation is concerned of the convention itself, the state of the implementation or the status of the implementation is only 61%, because as per the website of the OPCW, only 119 state parties have implemented comprehensive implementation legislation as of 31st July 2020. Meaning thereby that still there are about 37 states, there is a gap of 37% out of the total of 98% of the, once you take 193 states who are the state parties to the convention, it gives you a look at that it is probably 98% of the universalization. But actually there is a gap of 37% because actual implementation is only around 61%. The highlighted gaps are covered through the implementation of Resolution 1540. The detailed implementation measures required under operating paragraph 3 provide for the covering of these gaps. As I mentioned, the physical security, transportation security, the border security or border control or the export control, transshipment, target controls, etc., etc. Additionally, I may also like to point out that convention and the treaties are multilateral negotiated and concluded documents generally laying down obligation on the state itself. The states have choice to enter or exit the convention or a treaty as per the laid down procedure. As we have seen already in case of the NPT, the DPRK has withdrawn from the NPT, and number of times Iran has also indicated that if it is pushed to a corner, it might also withdraw from, because every convention or treaty has a withdrawal clause for the states to exercise if required. Whereas 1540 is equally applicable, those states who remain out have no obligation towards such a convention or treaty. As I said, that the Egypt, Israel, DPRK, and South Sudan are out of the CWC, so they have no obligation as far as the Chemical Weapon Convention is concerned. Whatever they do, they can continue doing. Legally, they will not commit any offense. As one of the attendees have asked the question as to why only after the Syrians have used, so everybody is worried about the Syrian chemical weapons. Why not earlier? The reason is that up to the 2013, Syria was not part of the CWC. The CWC became only effective in October 2013, as far as the Syria was concerned, and thereafter the JIM procedure, which was earlier mentioned by Icp, and all those activities, they were generated, and the controversy has come up. 1540 resolution is equally applicable across the board on all UN member states, and that is how it contributes to implement of all the non-proliferation regime, especially CWC. For this, I would like to give an example of, again, Egypt, not a state party to CWC, has no obligation to implement or enforce CWC provisions. Nonetheless, Egypt is implementing Resolution 1540, and as per the recently updated metrics, 1540 metrics, 50% of the operating paragraph 2 is being implemented. That is the prohibitions as far as the development and possession. Possession, obviously, they do not accept because they have the chemical weapon, or they have not signed the, they may be having, they have not signed the chemical weapon, but 50% of the operating paragraph 2 is being implemented with regard to CWC as far as the Egypt is concerned. Therefore, as far as the non-state actors and the terrorists are concerned, there are theoretically 50% less chances of proliferation of chemical weapons or related material with regard to Egypt. In addition, once we talk of 1540 resolution, we see that this resolution does not नहीं मैं तो इसमें बोल रहा हूँ ठीक है Yeah, I was mentioning that with regard to 1540 resolution and the CWC, I'll make 2 points that if you see the operating paragraph 5, we very clearly it mentions and that the 1540 is not in conflict with the rights and obligation of the state parties to the CWC or it affect any change in the responsibility of the OPCW. Meaning that it is a cooperative arrangement, it is complementing the CWC implementation by the state parties and not in conflict, or it doesn't override the obligation and the rights of the state parties, nor it alters the responsibility of the OPCW. The other thing is the operating paragraph 6, which the member states are called upon to develop national control list for the effective border and export control. That alone also, complements or show a kind of a help toward the implementation of 1540, implementation of CWC, because the CWC does not have those kind of listed items which are helpful in development of the chemical weapons themselves or their means of delivery. Before I conclude, I would just like to make 4 kind of recommendation come remarks that in fact, no amount of international instruments can hold their ground as far as the implementation and enforcement of international law is concerned, unless they are implemented objectively and without political biases by the major powers. If the major powers have the political biases in implementing the international law or enforcing the international law or the instruments will not hold ground. Sooner or later, they will crumble. And as it has been highlighted earlier by Ali Sattar, is in the case of 1540, the chemical weapons or OPCW. Assistant, the other thing is that the other recommendation I would make is that the assistance mechanism in 1540 it requires a lot of improvement, because presently it is only post box activity going on. States asking for the assistance comes to 1540, 1540 passes on to the international organization or the other states who are ready to provide the help or assistance, and then we don't know. The 1540 does not know as to what help has been provided to which member state or whether it has been provided at all or not. So that needs to be improved so that the 1540 also know and the other states also know that what is going on. The other is that the politicization, there should be a more closer cooperation between the 1540 committee, its group of experts, and OPCW with regard to raising awareness, especially with those member states or state parties who have yet to implement the comprehensive implementation measures or legislative measures in order to raise their awareness and the capacity building with regard to legal drafting of the national implementation legislation. With regard to the politicization of OPCW, I'll make a remark that after having served 5 years in the UN, started to slightly understand a bit of the politics at the United Nations Security Council. This is by design that the CWC has been, or the OPCW has been politicized because within the Security Council, once it comes to making sanctions, sir. So it doesn't matter because they've avoided that because they're in Security Council, they know that the sanctions can be vetoed, so they pass the buck to the OPCW and politicize that too also, not realizing that OPCW can apportion the blame under the IIT mechanism, but it will not be able to approve the sanctions on a state party because there is no mechanism as far as sanctions are concerned. For sanctions, it has to come back to Security Council, and Security Council will again be the same, the polarized, politicized Security Council, where there will be no success as far as the implementation of the non-proliferation regime overall is concerned. So that's what I wanted to say as far as the implementation of the CWC in the context of 1540 is concerned. Over to you, Mufira. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our last speaker in this session is Dr. Zafar Ali. He will give his views on Pakistan's export control legal framework covering CWC. Dr. Zafar Ali is currently serving as the Director General Strategic Export Control Division in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He holds Master's and PhD in Defense and Strategic Studies from Quaid-e-Azam University, Islamabad. He has participated in various bilateral and multilateral forums, including national and international workshops and seminars on non-proliferation, security, arms control, and strategic export control matters. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Afira. Thank you for that nice introduction. And let me try to share the screen with you if I could. All right. Being the last speaker, and this is for the first time that whatever, in fact, I thought that I would like to cover in my part of the presentation has already been said. So now I am grappling with my notes as to how I could give a different perspective of the title of the topic that was in fact assigned to me. But before that, I'm thankful to CISS for giving me this opportunity once again to speak on a topical issue which remains relevant and has attained prominence in the wake of use of chemical agents by state and non-state actors in the recent years. And I'm referring to the use of sarin chemical agent by the Shinrikyo cult in the Tokyo Subway 1995, use of chemical agents in the ongoing civil war in Syria, and earlier speakers talked about this in detail. Then it is allegedly targeted use in Kuala Lumpur against Kim Jong-nam in February 2017, and the use of military-grade nerve agent in an assassination attempt in Salisbury in 2018. Uh, uh, but that in fact shows how the CWC, its implementation, effectiveness, and the need for continuous improvement and refinement based on changing environment and changing technology is important. So I'm giving you my personal reflections on the subject, which should also not be attributed to my current professional position. The CWC, which was opened for signature in 1993 and came into force in April 97, grant parties to the convention on the production, acquisition, possession, and use of chemical weapons and their proliferations to state and non-state actors, and made it incumbent to destroy existing stocks and facilities. Pakistan signed the convention on 13 January 93 and ratified it on 28th of October 1997 as a non-possessive. As has already been referred by the speakers who came before me or who talked before me, there are 193 state parties as of now, and Israel, DPRK, Egypt, and South Sudan are still not parties to the convention. However, the convention itself remains a remarkable success in the field of multilateralism and arms control. I will very briefly talk about two areas on this issue. One is the regulatory mechanism, and the other important area that I thought would be relevant for this discussion in this webinar to bring out or highlight some of the challenges, both how further improvement could be made at the national level, and also what should be done for further improving the implementation of CWC at the international level. So one is the international regulatory mechanism, which revolves around the Chemical Weapons Convention, the OPCW, the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1540, which Mr. Zawar covered elaborately, and then there is Australia group, which is an informal grouping of 43 participating governments of this arrangement. Pakistan's national regulatory mechanism.
So your audio is not clear.
Hello.
So your audio is not clear.
It is not clear. Has it gone suddenly distorted, or it was not clear from the beginning?
It was distorted. So it was distorted bit earlier and now.
So Pakistan's national regulatory mechanism, is it okay now?
Zafar, a voice is coming from the back.
Well, that is objectionable if it is coming from there.
Buzzing, there is a buzzing sound at the back.
Everything off? So, well, I will try to speak a bit low. Perhaps that might improve the quality. So Pakistan's national regulatory mechanism is founded in the CWC Implementation Ordinance, the National Authority on Chemical Weapons Convention, Chemical Weapons Convention Implementation Rules of 2010, Import-Export Policy Order, Strategic Export Control Act 2004, and Environmental Protection Act of 1997. I'm sorry, this figure 7 is missing here in this slide. Also, there are other rules and laws that govern some aspects of the hazardous material. Afira, am I audible?
So you're audible, but there's noise in the background.
So, well, there is nothing which no machine running figure out of why the noise is being heard on your side. Besides the Environmental Protection Act, there are other laws and regulations which govern some aspects of chemicals, either possession, use, transport, or used for terrorist purposes like the DTA, which is the Anti-Terrorism Act of 1997. There is hazardous material act
Sir,
of
I guess there is some issue with your headphones.
Hello, is it okay now?
So you are audible, but noise is still there.
So that is then some technical fault which is beyond my
Sir.
actually.
Sir.
Should I continue?
Yes, sir, please continue.
Okay. Right. This remains a milestone agreement. Not only is this the first disarmament treaty to include a time frame for the elimination of an entire class of weapons of mass destruction, but it is also the first multilateral arms control treaty to incorporate an extensive verification regime. Pakistan remains fully committed to the objectives of the CWC and continues to actively and constructively participate in the activities of the OPCW. This OPCW is an implementing organ established or set up under the Chemical Weapons Convention, which is mandated to implement comprehensive prohibitions on chemical weapons. And these are codified in the convention itself. This slide gives a brief overview of various articles and what actually each article is about. The first article is very important because it lays out general obligations in the states in order to prohibit the development, production, acquisition, retention, stockpiling, transfer, and use of chemical weapons. And it also requires each state party to destroy chemical weapons and chemical weapons production facilities. And then there are other articles. Article 7 is also an important article which talks about the national implementation measures and requiring the states to promulgate, codify, or have legislations and implementing authorities. Article 10 talks about assistance and protection against chemical weapons. State parties retain their right to develop and use protection against chemical weapons, and Pakistan is a state which has declared its protection program under the convention. Article 11 is also very important for socio-economic development of the poor and developing countries, and it talks about, lays down conditions and procedures for economic and technological development, and says that the convention encourages to the fullest possible exchange of chemicals, equipment, and scientific and technological information relating to the development and application of chemistry for peaceful purposes. And this is another area which has drawn a lot of debate and criticism, because many of the developing countries are debarred, prevented from receiving technologies and other chemical equipment or exchange of scientific information, even for legitimate peaceful purposes, by being party to the Chemical Weapons Convention and declaring their non-possession of chemical weapons or chemical weapon facilities, etc. Still, those countries are denied access to chemicals, equipment, and other technologies. Under Article 8 of the Convention, Opcw, which is the Organizations for Chemical Weapons, was Prevention of Chemical Weapons, was set up, and it is headquartered in The Hague. The mandate of the Opcw is to implement a comprehensive prohibition on chemical weapons, which is again codified in the CWC. Obligation created by CWC branch out into two main areas. One is industry verification and data reporting, and other is promulgation and enforcement of national legislation. Industry inspections are the most direct non-proliferation and confidence building measures. Since its inception, the organization has conducted nearly 4,885 inspections, and all of these inspections have been routine inspections. And for Pakistan, it has been 44 inspections up to January 2030. And these inspections are conducted to verify that the production and consumption of chemicals are intended for peaceful purposes. The work of OPCW is done through its various organ and subsidiary bodies. It has a conference with the state party, and the speakers earlier before those who spoke before me have already dilated on these aspects, so I'm not going to the details. So there is conference of the state party where major policy decisions are taken. There is executive council and the technical secretariat, which provides technical assistance to the CSP, which is the council of state parties, and to the executive council, and also it has a verification division, inspectorate division for deployment of inspection teams. Also, there are subsidiary bodies, advisory, this is advisory board on technical affairs, and also there is a board on administration and finance and confidentiality commission. So far, 98.5% of the declared stockpiles have been destroyed, which in terms of the tonnage comes to 72,304 to 71,270 metric tons out of the declared tonnage of 72,304 metric tons. Chemical weapons on chemical weapon production facilities, there were declared 27, and out of this, 74 have been destroyed, and 43 have been converted for peaceful purposes. And as I said earlier, there have been around close to 5,000 routine inspections. Now, I will, although Mr. Zawar has covered this in detail, but I'll highlight some of the similarities between Security Council Resolution 1540 and the Chemical Weapons Convention. Resolution 1540 was adopted under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter and is legally binding on all member states. It seeks to build on other major non-proliferation treaties such as NPT, CWC, DWC, as well as associated export control arrangements by furthering limiting access to and transfer of WMDs and their delivery means, and broadens the scope of obligations to include non-state actors in the respect of prohibitions and control measures. The resolution specifies the obligations for what states have to do, but not how to do it. The resolution mandates, inter alia, the imposition of appropriate legal, regulatory, and administrative controls aimed at strengthening border and port detection capabilities and preventing the trafficking in materials and technologies related to the production of nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons and their delivery systems. In its operative para 1, of this on the states to refrain from providing any form of support to non-state actors that attempt to develop, acquire, manufacture, possess, transport, transfer, or use chemical, nuclear, chemical, or biological. Operative para 2 is another important part of the resolution, and this is an obligation in accordance with the respective national procedures to adopt and enforce appropriate effective laws which prohibit any non-state actor to acquire, possess, develop, transport, transfer, or use nuclear, chemical, or biological weapons and their means of delivery, in particular for terrorist purposes, as well as attempts to engage in any of these activities, participate in them, assist, or finance. And there is then this operative para 3, which requires the states to develop and maintain appropriate and effective measures to account for and secure such items, have physical protection measures, border controls and law enforcement to detect, deter, prevent, and combat the illicit trafficking and brokering. Also, there is that obligations to have export and transshipment controls including re-exports and providing grants and assistance in other form. I would like to flash this slide, which gives a comparison of 13 elements or 13 factors covered in the resolution, which is the 1540 resolution, and how the CWC corresponds to those 13 factors. Like, for example, UNSCR 1540 prohibits manufacture and production, etc. Same is the case with CWC on acquisition, possession, stockpiling, developing, well, transport. CWC is quite at this area, whereas UNSCR 1540 covers the transport of chemical, biological weapons and their systems as well. Transfer, use, and other aspect assistance, etc., are also covered by CWC as well as the 1540 resolution. Coming to the other part of my talk, which is the national regulatory mechanism, which revolves around the chemical weapons implementation ordinance itself, which is a crucial element in the non-proliferation regime to implement and enforce the requirements of the Chemical Weapons Convention. So, to attain objectives of the convention, Article 7 requires the states parties to enact laws to effectively control production and supply, including consumption of chemicals and relevant materials and control. This requires that state parties adopt the measures necessary to prevent and redress any breach of the CWC by their nationals in any area under their jurisdiction. The existence of loopholes could encourage possible terrorist uses of chemistry and chemicals. Pakistan attaches high importance to the effective implementation of the CWC and has put in place comprehensive legislative, regulatory, and administrative measures for implementation. The CWC implementation ordinance was promulgated in 2000, which gives effects to the implementation of CWC in Pakistan. It provides the regulation on all aspects related to chemicals, including prohibition, jurisdiction, licensing, import-export controls, inspections, access to facilities, inspectors' privileges and immunities, confidentiality aspects, mandate and enforcement powers of the national authority. And this national authority was has been set up under the CWC implementation ordinance of 2000, which acts as the national focal point for liaison with the OPCW and other state parties for the implementation of the CWC.
So, sir, please
Yes, please.
conclude your presentation. We
No,
have
I'll just
only
say
6
two
minutes
or
left.
three, 2 or 3
Sir.
minutes. So the national authority has mainly two functions. One is to fulfill national obligations under the CWC, and the other is to serve as a national focal point. This national authority prepares the national annual declarations on transfer of scheduled chemicals, also carries out outreach to the industry in order to educate the industry and the business community, including also the officials, especially the customs officials for investigating. Schedule 1 chemicals can only be transferred between the state parties, and that too in very limited quantity. Schedule 2 chemicals, the import and export of Schedule 2 chemicals from non-state parties is prohibited. And similarly, Schedule 3 chemicals and use certification is required for export of Schedule 3 chemical if they are to be exported to non-state parties, beside other requirements of and, that might be contained in the end user certificate or separately given, like where the chemicals would be used, the quantity required, and then the justification for the use of those are important. Those chemicals. Also, there are chemical weapons convention implementation rules, which have been issued pursuant to the ordinance of 2000. And these rules describe the establishment of advisory committee and its functions, also the registration requirement and criteria for scheduled chemicals, permit for import export of scheduled chemicals, and other procedures that are required for effective implementation of Chemical Weapons Convention. Import-export policy order is also in paragraph 11 of the Export Policy Order 2020 stipulates policy on how scheduled chemicals would be imported, and the procedures are given, which stipulates the requirement of a permit or permission from the National Authority for export of scheduled chemicals. Similarly, the Import Policy Order of 2020 lays down procedures on how import of scheduled chemicals will be proceeded with. Strategic Export Control Act is also an important area which comes into play with regards to providing affording to the government to export, control, export, re-export, transshipment, transit of goods, technologies, material, and equipment that would contribute to the designing, development, production, stockpile, maintenance, or use of nuclear and biological weapons. Now, this biological weapon side is also relevant to the chemical side, because all the production facilities that are usable for developing biological weapons are also, usable by the chemical industries, the chemical industry itself. So, from that angle, it is important. The Act also covers intangible technology transfer and prohibits damages. Control lists were notified in 2005 initially, and since then they have gone under a revision. Then non-listed items are covered under the catch-all. Comprehensive ICP guidelines, which Dr. Javed Khurshid also referred in his talk. These ICP guidelines were notified in 2014, which are equally useful and applicable to the chemical, relevant to the chemical industry to regulate their activity in accordance with the national law. These guidelines provide the procedure on how to set up a self-regulatory system in a small, medium, and large entity to minimize the risk of, in order to minimize the risk of law violation. Environmental Protection Act of 1997. This act prohibits the generation, collection, consignment, transport, treatment, disposal, etc., of hazardous substances, and that includes toxic chemicals. Also, there is the Anti-Terrorism Act of 1997, but I'll not go into the detail. This is my last slide. And I'll just briefly highlight the challenges that I think should be addressed in order to have effective implementation of the Chemical Weapons Convention at the national level and also at the national level. And many of the aspects have already been highlighted. The first is the biggest challenge is how to balance between responsible use of chemistry and security. So one of the speakers also mentioned establishment or setting up, laying down the code of conduct and code of ethics, etc., and also laying down guidelines for internal compliance, both for individual and for organization. Then there is the need to preserve and strengthen the moral and public backing for the CWC and for support to the convention. And in that, capacity building of scientists, academics, and enforcement people, which requires effective communication with industry and enhancement of national capacity through academia, and various measures could be worked out. But I see that there is, very limited interaction between the national authority and the higher education commission, the academia. That needs to be intensified if we have to promote responsible chemistry. Then CWC contemporary relevance with Syrian issue and arson threat of non-state actors, the difficulty of execution in case of use of chemical warfare agents by non-state actors, and all these aspects were highlighted in the first presentation by Mr. Ali Sattar. Article 7 requires certain provisions of the CWC to be translated into national laws, but the absence of a deadline for legislation to be in place after a state joins the CWC has led to its slow national implementation. And actually, the question at the point of universalization becomes more relevant in this particular area. And that is.
Dr. Zafar, I'm sorry to intervene, but I think you should conclude now because we are running out of time.
One last point, and that has also very elaborately been covered by Mr. Absal, that is fast-paced technological development and bringing in corresponding changes in the implementation mechanism. My concluding remark is that if, as a country, we want to improve our credential, that could be through diversifying chemical industry, membership of industrial chemical industry associations, and playing active part in the international associations of chemicals, and there are many, numerous, seeking ISO certification and promoting a responsible care program of the industry, of the chemical industry, which is community awareness and response. I thank you very much, and sorry for overshooting the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Zafar. I thank all the panelists for their comprehensive presentations. Now we are moving towards a question and answer session to further the ongoing discussion. As the session is live on Facebook, we will take some questions from our social media handle as well. So our first question is, why CWC failed in Syria's case instead of robust verification mechanism? All efforts started when Syria was thought to have used chemical weapons.
You can pass it on to one of the speakers.
So whoever wants to answer this question, because there's no name mentioned with this question.
I think Ali Sattar is appropriate to this.
So please unmute yourself.
Ali Sattar, unmute yourself.
Yes. I'll take this question. As I dilated on the Syria's case, I think what I was trying to say was that it's not that we are trying to defend Syria, that Syria has not used chemical weapons. Our contention was that the mandate of OPCW and in that case CWC is that of verification. By establishment of IIT and that also by a majority vote, we think it has bypassed the authority that has been assigned to OPCW, and that in turn is trying to it makes the entire process it makes it politicized. So we think that and plus, the evidence that was collected, it was not directly collected. It was collected through NGOs who were present in Syria. So second-hand evidence was collected, and the for fixing the responsibility, it's not the OPCW's job. It's the job of the United Nations Security Council. So that's why we feel that in Syria's case, robust verification might have been taken place, but fixing the responsibility was not OPCW's mandate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Arifa,
Next,
if you allow me, I would
sir, please. Sure.
I would just like to add one more thing. The major aspect of OPCW or UN's say investigations failure or not up to the mark was the prevalent security environment of the Syria. So that is one aspect which has not been catered by the OPCW and may say confront OPCW and its inspections in future as well.
Thank you, sir. Next question is from Dr. Javed can answer this question. What kind of challenges the OPCW verification regime has to face in light of the new technology development, and how these translate into compounding the political challenges in the implementation of the regime?
I think many innovative technologies are adopted by the member states, and for their usefulness, but it is difficult to separate. They have a lot of dual uses prospects. Such like I have already referred about the responsible chemistry, and such as these days the technology, nanotechnology is coming up, some innovative technologies in biotechnology and 3D laser printing, such things are coming up. So even the responsible chemistry means that we should not stop their dual uses, or their main purpose is to get us the advantages of these technologies. But still we have to keep an eye that where they are going to disturb where they are going to cause the challenge to the CWC. So we have to be very careful that we should not be disturbing the science achievements, but we should be following the CWC laws. And therefore I have suggested that we should have a responsible chemistry or institute, or a institute. We should be mentioning their drawbacks and usefulness, and an organization like Zafar Ali's SecDev should be controlling their applications. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Next question is that what is the current status of destruction of US and Russian chemical weapons stockpiles?
Can I answer this too a little? And after that, somebody can enter in.
Sure, sir.
Now the position is that 98% of the weapons are destroyed, but Russia, US, and India has 2% left. 2% the total is left with them, and they have agreed to destroy all these by 2023. Thank you.
So anybody wants to answer this?
Can I just add into what has already been said?
Sir, please.
As per the current status, only the US has stocks of the chemical weapons which are still left and are required to be destroyed as per the revised deadline by 2023. Russia has long declared that they are now free from the stockpiles that they had. And similarly, India also has declared that the stockpiles that they had declared as possessor state while they were joining the convention have been eliminated. Thank you.
So, next question could any speaker elaborate under what circumstances could toxic chemicals be used for right control or domestic law enforcement? Sir Zawar or Sir Zafar, if anybody could answer this question.
I can just say that under the exemption or the allowed permitted activities in Article 6, the right control agents can be used by the governments for right control. And also, many of the right controls agents have been agents are identified and discernible. Less few, like the white phosphorus, whether it could be widely used or not, and one or more chemical agent. Somehow that area remains murky, but permission or the governments can use these chemical agents for right control, which are less toxic than the military grade chemical agents. Thank you. Anybody else can just add to
Sir
what I've
Zawar,
said.
if you want to add something.
I think there is a bit confusion, because as such the right control agents and the toxic control agents, chemicals, they are not very clearly defined as to can a toxic, from the chemistry point of view, from the chemist point of view, can a toxic chemical be converted into a right control agent with a lesser intensity or not. So even in the convention, there is the way the chemicals are scheduled in Schedule 1, 2, and 3, depending upon their severity and gravity. The rights control agents have not been so defined as aforementioned. So there is a gray area. It probably needs to be studied a little more as to whether a proper toxic chemical can be used as a right control agent by the state under the existing laws or existing articles of the CWC. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sir, please unmute yourself.
Please unmute yourself.
Okay, he is trying to unmute. In that meantime, I will say that some of the toxic agents with less intensity are permitted on some occasions by some governments. Okay.
I would just like to add two things to it, as we have discussed along our discussion at various speakers level. Basic is that there are certain definitions. There are certain definitions which have not been clearly and precisely mentioned in the in the Chemical Weapons Convention, and the right control agent is one of those definitions which has not been very precisely done, and it has already been exploited by Russia once, and the Americans, they are also doing it, and I fear that seeing these big power, the other state parties with the chemical industry would also like to exploit this provision, which is a vague provision in the CWC. So that is one of the challenges for the OPCW, which it must address to define such things precisely for proper and total implementation of the convention. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, sir. As we are short on time, so I would like to invite Ambassador Ali Sarwar Naqvi to conclude the session and give his concluding remarks, please.
Thank you, Afira. This has been a very, as I had anticipated, a very productive and a very useful session in which I don't know, there might be people who are very knowledgeable, but I have learned quite a few things in regard to the CWC, the Chemical Weapons Convention, and all the various ramifications of this convention. I think this is a very, very sound convention, and the challenges that have been talked about are something that we have to take note of. Much of it is in institutional sort of institutional mechanisms that we should be putting in place for further study and monitoring and action in regard to compliance. So I think here the international community has done quite well, but obviously, as I had said in my opening statement, that it is not entirely or completely universal. Therefore, the lurking fear that there could be states or entities through whose territory or help one could, a state could deal in illicit chemical material. Chemical weapons actually are very difficult because of dealing with, because of the dual use aspect, and that I think is something that the OPCW and these member countries have to be very mindful of. So we have to look at how all this can be done at two levels. One, the national level, and the other, the international level. Pakistan is doing quite well, but Pakistan needs to keep further focus on it in the years to come. I don't want to prolong this discussion or my comments because we have run out of time, and I thank all the panelists, and I thank our researcher, Ms. Afira Firdaus, for her participation and conduct of the entire proceedings. The panelists have made very valuable contribution, and I think CISS and myself personally are grateful to each one of you for the presentations that you have made. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of our webinar. Thank you for your active participation. Goodbye. Allah Hafiz.
Office.
Thank you, and Allah Hafiz to all.
Allah Hafiz.